Mr. Walsh is Mr. Rodman. Quite an outlier also, just as President Trump. Really an emissary coming from the United States for Pyongyang?
No, not at all. I think there's a lot of bad speculation going on here. Let me throw a wet blanket on it. Some people say that Rodman's diplomacy is associated with the release of the American recently. That is simply not true. The U.S. Special Representative to North Korea, Joseph Yoon, met with North Korean officials in Oslo, arranged for an agreement that would allow him to visit the Americans being detained, also met with the North Korean ambassador in New York at the UN mission. He went to North Korea, saw those Americans, and then demanded that the young college student who is in a coma be released. That is what happened, wholly separate from Dennis Rodman.
Well, maybe that is true, but Professor Oh in South Korea, as we have observed, Mr. Rodman had been traveling to the DPRK in North Korea at some critical times, 2013, 2014, some very successful, some not necessarily so, and this time as well, so much public spotlight.
So you can speculate again on this because it's a timely coincidental trip by Mr. Rodman to North Korea, indicating various possibilities about his trip, especially his connection to President Trump, for example. But we have no concrete evidence whatsoever about his real official role in DPRK, such as representing Donald Trump's diplomatic missions. But we have some kind of evidence here today that Rodman trip today or in the past had no real diplomatic results that are good for the United States or South Korea.
But at least for now, Mr. Zhao here in Beijing, we see more news coming from DPRK and North Korea as a result of Mr. Rodman's trip. He met with the Minister of Sports in North Korea. He met also with the female basketball players, a team of them. And also he presented gifts, for example, 2 books, including one book written by President Trump 3 decades ago, The Art of the Deal. Is he trying to say anything? Of course, I know you cannot read his mind, Mr. Rodman's mind, but you know, does that send any signal to you?
Well, I think regardless of whether Rodman's trip was supported by the U.S. government, apparently he has some relationship, he has some connections, history with Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump tweeted in 2014, I think, that he believed Rodman's visit at that time was more effective than the visits by American officials in dealing with North Korea. But also I think we shouldn't underestimate the possibility that Kim Jong-un really wants to send a goodwill signal by inviting Rodman. In history, in China, actually in 1970, when China wanted to improve relations with the United States, Mao Zedong invited Edgar Snow to stand side by side with him on the Tiananmen Tower. And that picture was then published on the first page of Renmin Daily, People's Daily. And that signal, however, was not understood by Kissinger, who thought, Snow was a pro-China communist, and therefore he dismissed that signal. And that was an opportunity lost in history. I hope we will not repeat that mistake and really pay enough attention to the signal that was sent by Kim Jong-un.
It's a very interesting point. Mr. Walsh, there might be political reasons that Washington do not necessarily want to link with Mr. Rodman. There might be also practical reasons why Mr. Rodman should not and will never be an emissary. However, it would not prevent the other party of using this trip as a gesture to show to his own country back at home, I mean the North Koreans, and also to show to the Americans what the North Korean leader has in mind right now. At least a try, Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that that's a possibility, that the Kim leadership is using this for their own purposes, that this is, Rodman, and I've followed his career since he was in the NBA, and his tragic post-NBA career. He's a person with substance abuse problems. He's touring North Korea right now with a T-shirt. He's basically a company has paid him to go to promote. It's a Bitcoin company for marijuana dispensaries, and that's what he's promoting.
All right, we
and,
don't
and
talk
that
about
company
what
knows that
he's
his
promoting
picture
right
will
now.
be- Yes,
Let's
but-
just talk
but
about
your
what about that
point is-
coincidence?
Yeah, your point is well taken. And especially given the fact that this is a delicate moment with the return of that young man who was in a coma for over a year and is now being released. This could be a very difficult time in the U.S. in terms of the optics of that vis-a-vis North Korea. This presents another opportunity. I also think, actually, looking at it as a scholar, you know, no one gets to meet with Kim Jong-un. Almost no one. Dennis Rodman has.
Right.
You know, even in his impaired state, there's value, it seems to me, for some American to have some interaction with him that he can then, or more likely his staff can then report when he returns to the U.S. So, you know, I'm in favor of getting more data, and if the data has to come through Rodman, then so be it. But I don't think he's going to be acting in an official capacity. But I do think the North Koreans, there's a window open. They've been communicating. There's a window open for trying to get something started diplomatically. This may be part of that.
All right, Professor. Oh, observing from South Korea, do you think that is really a window opportunity for the Korean Peninsula, particularly for North Korea and the United States to smooth something out? Or at least, gentlemen, just to talk to one another on certain channels?
Well, it could be a window opportunity, but not for South Korea, but rather for North Korea, because they're using this Rodman card to talk to Donald Trump. They are not indicating any possibilities of talking to South Korea. So South Korea, again, is jammed in between. Here, two powers, North America and North Korea, trying to talk to each other. But here, the card, Rodman card, is very funny indeed, because he has never produced anything concrete in the past. And we don't expect anything to come out of this visit again this year, because he's promoting something else.
Well, whether we can expect anything specific, diplomatic specific, coming from Mr. Rodman trip is probably too far a wish to make. Yet, Mr. Zhao, at this point, Mr. Rodman claimed himself to be a great friend of President Trump, because he was on The Apprentice show, the reality show, even though he failed, eventually got rid of, but you know, he was there. And President Trump talked about him as a good friend. Meanwhile, Mr. Rodman claimed he is a friend of lifelong time with the president of North Korea, Mr. Kim. So it seems that, you know, apparently, at least verbally, he could be something.
Right, indeed. The entire episode is really like a reality TV.
Well, probably more than that, sir.
Even though North Korea wants to portray this release of the college student Wonbia as a good signal of goodwill to the United States, actually it turned out, I'm afraid, going to have a negative impact on near-term engagement between United States and North Korea. Given the fact that this young man has been in coma for over 1 year, and his return has only really increased anger and shock and horror in the perception of American general public. So this was not perceived in any possible manner in the United States.
Right.
With that said, the positive thing can have the negative thing can have a positive side as well. The release of this college student indeed prompted a senior U.S. official, Mr. Jae-in, to travel to Pyongyang to secure his release. That opened an very rare event where senior American officials haven't really visited Pyongyang for a long time. And in recent track 2 dialogues in Oslo, for the first time that a sitting incumbent American official took part in the discussion, which signals that the United States wanted to set up its engagement with North Korea.
All of this have a lot to do with a lot of moving factors as we speak. How every parties within this interesting range think about the possibilities. For example, South Korea and the United States. President Moon, the newly elected South Korean president, has vowed to take a twin-track approach dealing with Pyongyang by increasing pressure, but also pursuing what he called dialogue. Moon's stance of having closer engagement with the DPRK is nicknamed as the moonshine, as as opposed to the Sunshine earlier policy. After the Sunshine policy started a decade ago, among his appointments, there are several influential people who are eager to engage with DPRK. Cho Myung-gun, if I pronounce the name right, was nominated as his new unification minister and is sympathetic to his northern neighbor, and also former Navy chief as well as his defense minister, who vows to push the reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Park. All of this, one is politically, the other is when it comes to economic and trade ties. We see some messages already being sent. So I want to go to you, Professor Oh. I know you are very skeptical about relinking North and South, but do you think this could also be a window opportunity? When window opportunity is overlapping, there's something that we're really talking about here.
Well, the real test for the Moon administration is whether he can pull tricks toward China on the one hand and toward North Korea on the other. And he hasn't shown anything successful yet, but he has always promised that he will hire people who are in favor of talks with North Korea on the one hand, and who are also in favor of China and U.S. Balanced diplomacy. I think he's taking a very serious action right now, trying to convey his ideas to China and America at the same time, that he's taking a balanced action, which means, if I translate it in simple English, which means South Korea will remain a friend of U.S. and China will be a probably secondary partner when it comes to the deals with North Korea. Okay. So that is very clear from his positions.
Very interesting point there. Mr. Zhao, here in Beijing, you see every player about the DPRK issue is trying to play the utmost about all the possibilities. Talking about South Korean president, our South Korean panelists already talked about that. But Mr. Zhao, what about China's role? Can China also have different ways of approaching this, leaving itself more options?
Well, I think even though China wants to do its utmost to help, but I think Chinese influence is really limited because there are deeper problems here. The North and South Koreans, they have very different mindsets. There is this common wisdom that the precondition for engaging with North Korea should be North Korea suspending its at least existing missile tests in the first place. However, North Korea sees its missile tests very differently. It believes that its missile tests are really aimed against the United States, the North Korea's primary enemy, and not really aimed against South Korea. And therefore, North Korea believes that it can engage with South Korea while still keep
Mr.
testing
Zhao,
missiles.
I have to jump in here. I mean, earlier we were talking also. You were saying, well, it has a lot to do with how the North is dealing with the United States. Then today you are saying, oh, it depends a lot to do on how the North is dealing with the South. So are you saying China should excuse itself, its own role in this regard?
I think both North Korea and the United States are playing the game of imposing more pressure and see who will blink first. Even the United States, its policy is to impose maximum pressure and then engage. So it has to offer talk at some point. But before that, both countries are doing their utmost to increase their leverage in case there is a negotiation. For China, I think the only possibility is to promote some near-term overturn between the two countries. It's very impossible that we can see fundamental progress overnight. But the only near-term solution, I think, is to, for North Korea to stop its missile tests, and in return for South Korea and the United States to offer something in return. But so far,
I got your point. I got your point. Those points clearly identified already. Mr. Walsh, so I want to go to you. You got two things handled here. One is with South Korea for the United States. The THAAD deployment has been suspended, at least for now. Some say it's not likely to happen anymore, at least for this year. What's going to happen with the summit between the two presidents when they meet very soon? Secondly, you've also got to deal with North Korea, as China really demanded here, because you need to talk to one another. There has to be a way figured out by the two of you, the most critical players. So, Mr. Walsh, talk about those 2 points.
Well, first on the summit, you're right to put your finger on that. I think, let's not rush to judge Moon too early yet. He doesn't even have a full cabinet. May have gotten his foreign minister yesterday, I'm not sure, but there are a lot of positions that are open. I'm going to Seoul on Sunday. I'll have some sense of how far it's progressed, but he needs to get a government in place. And then you're absolutely right. That summit with Trump will be critical, it'll be crucial, and then we'll see what happens. Now on THAAD, I expect Moon to sort of navigate, as your other guests have suggested in a broader sense, navigate between two things. You'll remember that he was pretty darn upset about the fact that there were additional installations made at that THAAD site, and the military did not inform him of that. And that's when he suspended further construction there. And so he has sort of a ready-made excuse to make a pause. So he's not saying, let's get rid of THAAD, but he's also not saying, let's move forward really quickly with THAAD.
What are you suggesting?
I think he'll continue to sort of take that middle course and try to balance the U.S., China, and his own engagement policy. I think that, but I think we need to give him a little time here. He's barely been in office, you know, just a couple of weeks, really.
That's true. That's true.
I think he'll try to balance
That's true. But you know, President Trump and President Kim from North Korea, United States, they've been in the office for quite some time, to say the least. So, Mr. Walsh, should there be some kinds of dialogue, platform, discussion, communication? If you want to move things forward, it has to start from somewhere. Do you have any inside information about where we are?
Well, I think we get a little hint of that. As I say, I think the biggest development here is that you had a U.S. official go to Pyongyang, as our colleague from Carnegie emphasized. So that is a beginning. Having the release of that American is another step in that direction. You're absolutely right that there has to be dialogue, if only to reduce the risk of accidental war, a war that no one wants. That's the best preventive, is communication, and we are starting to see some communication. Hopefully the New York channel will continue to be a piece of that, and it will build from there. I would like to see talks without preconditions. Let's just sit down and talk with no side imposing conditions on the other side, and China has an important role to play there.
Professor Oh from South Korea, how much power do you think President Moon, newly elected one, is having in his hands so that he can play some of the cards he wants to within the national politics in order to have some ways to deal with the DPRK nuclear issue, at least to seek some solutions? Will economic come first, or politics come first?
Well, either from either side, he is having a lot of problems because he hasn't barely appointed foreign minister yet. She was supposed to be very proactive in terms of talking to North Korea and talking to China to convince the THAAD deployment by the U.S. Army, but she is not yet approved by the Congress, which also means that it means that President Moon must use his own force to go ahead with the appointment of that new minister, which means that the opposition party, which holds the majority in the Congress, will be very upset about this. They have been sending warnings against the Moon administration for not cooperating with him, especially on the issue of North Korea and the THAAD. So Moon's only hope is to regain, parliamentary majority in the next election. But that's a sort of, a hope that is few and far between.